I wasn't looking for love, not really. At 28, I was a rising star at my finance firm. Spreadsheets were my love language, and my cubicle felt more like home than any bar or dating app ever could. Then came Sarah's rooftop party. Sarah, my coworker and best friend, had a knack for dragging me out of my comfort zone. This time, it was a mixed crowd, a bunch of artists and musicians Sarah knew, and a few of the more normal people from the office. That's where I saw him. He was arguing, well, more like playfully sparring, with a guy over the best way to restore a brick building. He was tall and lean, with kind eyes and a mess of dark brown hair that looked like he just ran his fingers through it. He wore a worn leather jacket over a faded t-shirt that probably had a band logo I wouldn't recognize. The opposite of my usual button-down and slacks crowd, but something about him drew me in. So, you think slapping a fresh coat of paint on history is a good idea? He was saying, a playful smile on his face. The other guy, a stocky dude with a shaved head, rolled his eyes. Hey, it preserves the structure, right? Yeah, but it erases the character, the guy in the leather jacket countered. The cracks and the wear, that's what tells the story. I found myself walking closer, drawn to their easy banter. Just then, Sarah appeared beside me, a mischievous glint in her eyes. Amelia, this is Mark, she said, nudging me forward. Mark, this is Amelia, the spreadsheet wizard I was telling you about. Mark turned, his smile widening when he saw me. Spreadsheet wizard, huh? Sounds impressive. It pays the bills, I replied, feeling a blush creep up my cheeks. But I can also hold my own in a conversation that doesn't involve amortization schedules. I winked at Sarah, who snickered. Challenge accepted, Mark said, his voice warm and inviting. So, Amelia the spreadsheet wizard, what do you think about preserving history? We ended up talking for hours about everything and nothing. He was an architect, passionate about restoring old buildings and giving them new life. I told him about my crazy hours at the firm and the satisfaction of closing a big deal. There were no awkward silences, just a comfortable flow of conversation that felt effortless. As the night wound down, we found ourselves standing by the railing, overlooking the city skyline. The air was cool, and goosebumps prickled my arms. This was fun, I admitted, surprised by the slight tremor in my voice. Yeah, he agreed, his gaze fixed on the glittering cityscape. I wouldn't mind doing this again sometime. Me neither, I blurted out before I could overthink it. We met with Mark's parents, Martha and Arthur, at a fancy restaurant they picked. The conversation flowed easily enough, at first. We talked about the wedding plans, the venue I'd booked, a beautiful old converted library, and the caterer I was stressing over. Turns out organic, locally sourced canapés are a pricey business. Then, things took a weird turn. Martha, mid-bite of her lobster bisque, which she pronounced bisky with a forced accent, suddenly fixed me with a steely gaze. So, Amelia, she said, dabbing her lips with a napkin, Mark tells me you work in finance? Yes, I'm a financial analyst at a large firm downtown, I replied, unsure where this was going. Analyst, huh? Sounds important, Arthur chimed in, his voice booming across the table. You must do well for yourself. Mark, who had been mostly quiet up until this point, cleared his throat. Dad, come on. That's not what we're talking about. Just making conversation, son, Arthur said, waving his hand dismissively. He turned back to me. So, Amelia, you mentioned a firm? Big name, I presume? I told him the name of the firm, a global player in the financial world. A satisfied smile spread across Martha's face. Excellent, she declared. And you say you do well for yourself? Investments? Stocks? That kind of thing? Yes, I manage a portfolio, I replied, feeling increasingly uncomfortable. This felt more like an interrogation than a meeting with my future in-laws. A portfolio, huh? Martha leaned forward, her eyes gleaming. How much are we talking about here, dear? My jaw dropped. This was outrageous. Nobody, not even family, asked questions like that. I glanced at Mark, hoping he'd step in, but he just avoided my gaze, fiddling with his breadbasket. "That's really personal information, Mrs. Miller," I said, forcing a smile. "Oh, come on, honey," Martha huffed. "We're practically family now. Isn't that right, Mark?" Mark mumbled something non-committal, his cheeks flushed pink. I decided to take matters into my own hands. "Look," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "Money isn't everything. Mark and I love each other, and that's what matters most." "Love is great, sweetheart," Arthur chimed in again. "But let's face it, love doesn't pay the bills." I took a deep breath. This dinner was turning into a disaster. "Maybe we should stick to talking about the wedding," I suggested, hoping to change the subject. The next morning, I called my grandma. As soon as I hung up with her after recounting the dinner with Mark's parents, a wave of doubt washed over me. Her words, "greedy and selfish people," echoed in my head. But I brushed it off. Grandma could be a bit old-fashioned sometimes. Sure, Martha and Arthur were a little blunt, but they seemed genuinely happy for us. Maybe they were just a bit awkward when it came to expressing their emotions. Fast forward a few months, and wedding planning was in full swing. Everything, from the venue to the flowers, felt like pulling teeth. Whenever money came up, Mark would give a sheepish shrug and say, "Work's been a bit tight lately." His parents, bless their hearts, kept offering suggestions: cheaper venues outside the city limits, a family friend who did amazing catering for a discount meaning they'd barter for vegetables from their neighbor's garden. Needless to say, I ended up footing most of the bill. Mark, ever the charmer, would say things like, "You're amazing, honey. Handling everything like a champ." But his lack of financial contribution started to grate on me. Finally, the big day arrived. It was beautiful, the weather cooperated, the food was delicious, and most importantly, Mark and I said "I do." The only sour note was Grandma. After the ceremony, she pulled me aside, her wrinkled face etched with concern. "Amelia, honey," she said, her voice low, "be careful with those in-laws of yours. They don't have your best interests at heart." I rolled my eyes. Here we go again. "Grandma, they're just excited. They love Mark, they love me. Everything's fine." The honeymoon phase was barely over, the leftover wedding cake still sitting on the counter, when the first major in-law incident occurred. It was a Sunday morning, and Mark and I were still luxuriating in bed when a loud thump from downstairs shattered the peaceful silence. We exchanged a confused look, then Mark mumbled, "Probably the mail." Wrong. The thump was followed by a cacophony of rustling paper and muffled exclamations. Throwing on robes, we hurried downstairs to find a scene that could have been ripped straight out of a horror movie. Well, a horror movie with a lot of floral wrapping paper and gaudy gift bags. Martha and Arthur were sprawled on the living room floor, surrounded by wedding presents like vultures picking over a carcass. They were tearing into boxes, oohing and awing over some items, tossing others aside with dismissive grunts. "What in the world is going on here?" I demanded, my voice laced with disbelief. Martha, mid-unwrap, looked up and flashed a megawatt smile. "Amelia, darling. Just admiring your lovely wedding gifts." "Admiring?" I sputtered. "It looks more like you're ransacking the place." Arthur, holding up a crystal vase and squinting at it, snorted. "Relax, sweetheart. Just sorting things out. Can't have all this clutter lying around, can we?" Clutter? These were gifts, chosen with love, hopefully, by our friends and family. But before I could voice my outrage, Mark spoke up. "Maybe they should just leave the presents unopened, right?" he said, his voice mild. "Exactly," I chimed in, relieved he wasn't completely oblivious. Martha scoffed. "Don't be silly, honey. It's rude not to open presents. Besides," she added, her eyes gleaming, "we might find something truly special in here." Special for them, that much was clear. I watched in growing frustration as they picked through the gifts, setting aside anything that caught their fancy: a silver picture frame, a set of engraved wine glasses, a fancy cheese board. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "These are our wedding gifts," I said, my voice firm. "Not yours to take." "Look, honey," Martha said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "We just saw some things that would look lovely in our new house. You know, the one we're redecorating." They were redecorating? With our wedding gifts? The anger bubbled up inside me, threatening to spill over. "What about the gift you got us?" I asked, my voice tight. Martha paused, her hand hovering over a box wrapped in fancy floral paper. She rummaged through the pile, finally pulling out a small, oddly shaped package. With a flourish, she handed it to me. I unwrapped it slowly, my heart sinking with each layer of tissue paper. Inside was a cheap glass statuette, the kind you'd find at a discount store, adorned with garish plastic flowers. My stomach churned. This was their idea of a wedding gift? Maybe Grandma was right. Maybe I'd married into a nightmare. The wedding gift incident was just the tip of the iceberg. Martha's shopping sprees became a regular occurrence. She'd call, all chipper, and ask me to join her for a girls' day out. What it actually meant was me being her unpaid personal shopper. We'd browse stores, and inevitably, Martha would find something absolutely must-have. Then, at checkout, she'd do this weird shuffle with her purchases and mine, muttering about forgetting her wallet and such a hassle with separate bags. Of course, by the time the cashier figured it all out, I'd be stuck paying for both our stuff. Arthur wasn't much better. Weekends were his prime visiting time. He'd waltz in unannounced, plop himself down on the couch, and proceed to spend the entire day glued to the TV, inhaling whatever snacks I had on hand. When I finally built up the courage to ask him why he spent so much time at our place, he looked at me with a straight face and said, "Saves money on groceries and electricity, doesn't it?" The audacity of the man. Did he think we were running a charity? Mark, ever the peacekeeper, just rolled his eyes and muttered something about Dad just needing some company. The birthday dinner was the final straw. I decided to treat myself, a nice night out at a fancy restaurant, to celebrate another year older, and hopefully wiser. Naturally, I invited Martha and Arthur. Big mistake. The menu was a confusing array of French names and unfamiliar ingredients. Undeterred, Martha and Arthur ordered the most expensive dishes, pronouncing them with a confidence that belied their complete lack of knowledge. Halfway through the meal, Martha declared the escargots too slimy and pushed the plate away. Arthur choked on a mouthful of bouillabaisse, spraying a gout of saffron broth across the table. The entire evening was a disaster. By the time the bill arrived, my blood pressure was through the roof. The cost of that meal could have fed us for a month. And guess who offered to chip in? Nope, not Mark. He just sat there, oblivious, while I choked out a strained thank you to the waiter and reached for my credit card. Back home, fuming and frustrated, I finally confronted Mark. "How can you just let your parents walk all over you like that?" I demanded. "Come on, babe," he said, dismissive. "It's not a big deal. They're just, like that." Like what? Selfish and entitled? "Mark, this isn't okay." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Look, I love you, but you gotta pick your battles. My parents are, well, my parents. They're not gonna change." Maybe he was right. Maybe I had been naive, hoping to change them, to somehow mold them into the in-laws I'd always dreamed of. But the reality was staring me in the face. Martha and Arthur were who they were, and that wasn't going to change. The birthday dinner debacle was a turning point, but not the end. The in-law gift-giving strategy became painfully clear: shower us with cheap, impersonal trinkets on holidays and expect extravagant presents in return. A framed picture of a lighthouse for Christmas? Try a top-of-the-line espresso machine for Mother's Day, according to Martha's order. Any hint at the unbalanced value of gifts resulted in a lecture about family and not keeping score. My grandma, bless her soul, wouldn't dream of asking for anything. Every time I'd inquire about a holiday gift, she'd brush it off with "Honey, I have everything I need. Just come visit, that's all that matters." Meanwhile, Martha and Arthur treated gift-giving like a competitive sport. They'd show up unannounced, a triumphant glint in their eyes, brandishing their latest treasures. A chipped ceramic fruit bowl for Christmas? A set of mismatched oven mitts decorated with faded cartoon cats for Valentine's Day? Each offering felt like a slap in the face. The final insult came on Thanksgiving. This year, I'd opted for a quiet night in, just Mark and me, maybe order some takeout and watch a movie. But of course, Martha and Arthur had other plans. They barged in, laden with shopping bags, their faces plastered with self-satisfied grins. "Happy Thanksgiving, sweetie," Martha trilled, thrusting a brightly wrapped package at me. I unwrapped it with a sinking feeling. Inside was a gaudy scarf, the kind you might find at a gas station gift shop. Flowers were fake plastic, the fabric felt like sandpaper against my skin. "It's perfect, isn't it?" Martha beamed. "Matches your new coat perfectly." I forced a smile. The coat in question was a vintage find I'd scored at a thrift store. The scarf, well, it clashed spectacularly. "Thanks, Martha," I mumbled, trying to hide my disappointment. Arthur, meanwhile, was holding up a small box. "And for you, son," he declared, "a little something to help you unwind after a long day at work." Mark's eyes lit up. He eagerly tore into the box, revealing a pack of cheap drugstore cigars. The kind that smelled like dirty ashtrays and regret. "Thanks, Dad," he said, a genuine smile spreading across his face. That was it. The final straw. Here I was, staring at a birthday gift that insulted my taste and a husband who seemed more excited about a pack of drugstore cigars than his wife's well-being. The anger simmered inside me, threatening to boil over. But instead of exploding, I did something completely unexpected. I took a deep breath, forced a smile, and thanked them for the lovely gifts. A glimmer of hope arrived in the form of my work performance. I landed a coveted quarterly award, a hefty bonus that practically screamed, "Celebrate." Venice, with its romantic canals and rich history, had always been a dream destination. Knowing I spoke fluent Italian sealed the deal. This trip, I decided, would be a chance to reconnect with Mark, to escape the suffocating grip of his parents for a while. Except news travels fast, especially bad news to eager ears. Martha and Arthur, upon learning of our travel plans, descended like hungry vultures. "Venice, huh?" Martha cooed, her eyes gleaming with a disturbing avarice. "Sounds delightful. Always wanted to see those gondolas up close." "Actually," I said, trying to be polite, "this trip is just for Mark and me. A little romantic getaway." Arthur scoffed. "Come on, Amelia, don't be selfish. We've never been to Europe, let alone Venice. Think of the pictures." Pictures? This wasn't about a photo op with gondolas, it was about escaping their smothering presence. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice firm, "but this is a trip for two." My polite refusal triggered a meltdown of epic proportions. They called me selfish, greedy, accused me of trying to alienate Mark from his family. The worst part? Mark, ever the peacekeeper, didn't stand up for me. Instead, he mumbled something about maybe they could come along and it wouldn't be that bad. That's when I knew. This wasn't just about a trip anymore. This was about boundaries, about respect, about whether our marriage could survive his parents' constant intrusion. I looked at Mark, my voice laced with ice. "Absolutely not. This is our trip, and they are not invited." The fight that followed was brutal. Harsh words were exchanged, accusations hurled. By the end of it, a heavy silence had settled between us. We retreated to opposite ends of the apartment, a cold war brewing in our once happy home. Days blurred into one another, the silence in the apartment a constant reminder of the chasm that had opened between Mark and me. I didn't call his parents, the mere thought of their entitled whining made my stomach churn. Mark remained in his self-imposed exile, the only communication a terse "good morning" mumbled in the kitchen each day. Then, on a random Saturday morning, I woke up to an empty apartment and a sinking feeling in my gut. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, the notification sound grating on my nerves. Glancing at it, my blood ran cold. Airline ticket confirmations. 3 of them. To Venice. Purchased from my account. Panic clawed at my throat. No. It couldn't be. But as I scrolled through the confirmations, the sickening truth settled in. Mark, with the audacity of a seasoned thief, had used my trusted access to our bank account to book not only his own ticket to Venice, but 2 more, for his precious parents. Hotel reservations, also courtesy of my hard-earned money, confirmed my suspicions. He'd gone behind my back, completely disregarded my feelings, and booked a vacation for himself and his leech-like family with my money. The anger, hot and furious, burned away the remnants of any affection I might have had left for him. My fingers flew across the screen, canceling the return flights and hotel rooms. Next, with a steely resolve, I revoked Mark's access to my bank account. One small act of defiance in the face of their colossal selfishness. A few hours later, my phone erupted with a call. Mark's name flashed on the screen, but I let it go to voicemail. The voicemail notification arrived a moment later, his voice laced with a mixture of panic and fury. "Amelia, where the hell are you? We're supposed to be checking into the hotel. What did you do with the tickets?" I deleted the message without listening. Then came a barrage of texts, from both Mark and Martha. A mixture of demands, accusations, and veiled threats. Mark's final message, though, sent a dark chuckle rippling through me. "If you don't give me back access to the account and get us on that damn plane, Amelia, we're done. Consider this your divorce notice." With a newfound clarity, I started making my own plans. I contacted a lawyer, the weight lifting from my shoulders with each step towards independence. Mark's divorce notice might as well have been a gift. I didn't wait for Mark to waltz back in, tail between his legs. Packing was cathartic. Clothes went into suitcases, knickknacks into boxes. But the gifts from Martha and Arthur, those gaudy trinkets and mismatched sets, I left untouched. I lined them up on the living room floor, a garish monument to their selfishness. A final act of defiance before I slammed the door shut on that chapter of my life. Grandma's house, with its familiar scent of cinnamon rolls and worn furniture, felt like a warm hug. Tears streamed down my face as I recounted the entire ordeal, the hurt and anger spilling out like a dam breaking. Grandma listened patiently, a sad smile on her lips. "I told you, honey," she said softly, her voice laced with a hint of "I told you so," but mostly concern. "But sometimes you gotta learn things the hard way." "You know," I said, a newfound determination settling in my voice. "Maybe this is a good thing. Now I know what to look for, what to avoid." A few days later, a knock on the door shattered the peaceful afternoon. My heart lurched, but before I could react, Grandma ushered me towards the back room. Peeking through the curtain, I saw Mark standing there, looking lost and dejected. "Amelia, please," he pleaded, his voice thick with desperation. "Let me explain." Grandma opened the door a crack, her expression unreadable. Mark launched into a groveling apology, spewing words about realizing his mistakes and trying to distance himself from his parents. The anger that had been simmering inside me bubbled over. I barged into the hallway, a cold fury in my eyes. "Distance himself?" I scoffed. "Mark, you were about to spend my money taking them on a vacation. This isn't about you suddenly seeing the light. This is about you being comfortable. Comfortable because I paid the bills and bought your parents presents." He opened his mouth to protest, but I cut him off. "No, Mark. This is over. I don't want to build a life with someone who prioritizes comfort over respect, or someone who lets his parents walk all over him and his wife. I deserve better than that." Mark's face crumpled, but this time I felt no pity. The door shut with a finality that echoed in the silence that followed. Maybe Grandma was right. Maybe this wasn't the end. Maybe it was the beginning of something new, something better. A life free of entitled in-laws, a life filled with respect, and maybe, someday, with love that wasn't selfish or convenient.
All right, everyone's presentations are done, Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my 2nd year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children. With zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job. Having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.